We concluded part 1 of this series by noting the example of universal laws found in the Old Testament law. Now let's discuss the other categories using our landlord example. Let's say that the old leases our landlord offered have a rule that says all residents have to park their cars on the west side of the apartment complex on Tuesdays between 7 and 9 p.m. and not park in spaces on the east side. Would we expect this to be on leases for the new apartments? That depends. To find out, we have to know why this rule was made in the first place. Let's just say the rule was made because on Tuesdays between 7 and 9 p.m., the city sends its garbage trucks in to collect trash from the bins which are on the east side of the building. And this means that if residents park their cars in that area, they might get damaged. Now, the new leases may or may not have the same rule. If there's a place in that parking lot where the garbage is picked up at the same time, the rule could be slightly different if garbage is picked up on Thursdays between 2 and 4 p.m. Or there might not be a rule like it at all if garbage is picked up somewhere other than the parking lot. This would be like what in the Old Testament law would be called cultural universals. Laws geared to Israel's culture that have a universal moral law or principle behind them. My favorite example of this is from Deuteronomy 22. I knew a fundy atheist who said that you would be hard-pressed to find home builders who follow this rule, but actually they do follow the modern equivalent. In ancient Israel, the flat roof of a house would be used for many purposes, such as sleeping, household chores, and entertaining. Even today the roof is used for such things in modern Middle Eastern nations. We don't use our roof the same way, but the modern equivalent is a balcony. And our builders certainly do make sure that they follow the point of this rule to the letter, because what's at stake is a much larger moral concern, that of people's safety. In the same way, in the example of our apartment leases, the overriding principle to the older law was to prevent property damage. But if the new apartment complex doesn't have the same rule because of differing conditions like garbage being picked up in a different place or time, that doesn't mean the landlord changed his mind about preventing property damage. The principle is still one he values, and that means even if the new lease doesn't say don't damage property, chances are that that's a principle the landlord will still observe. And by the way, this reflects a mistake a lot of fundy atheists make when they address this issue. They think that this reflects some notion of biblical morality as circumstantial or subjective. When they argue that, though, they're failing to recognize that there's a difference between what we might call first-order moral concerns, the moral universals, and second-order moral concerns, or laws that are applications of those universals to specific situations. The first-order morals remain the same and are considered objective. It's the second level that changes and can be subjective or circumstantial. Finally, we should briefly mention a third category of what could be called ritual laws. There's no direct analogy to this in our apartment example. But in the Old Testament covenant, this would have been things like festivals, circumcision, and sacrifices. Or in the New Testament covenant, it would be baptism and communion. Obviously, these would be quite specific to their covenants. In all of this, the critical question with respect to the Old Testament is, how do we know which laws reflect first-order morals and which reflect second-order morals? Well, the answer is, you have to do research and figure it out. Yeah, I know. Fundy atheists hate it when we ask them to think. But that's the way it is. Bottom line, though, is there's not automatically an inconsistency in using one particular Old Testament moral law while ignoring others. That would have to be argued on merit.